Nikita, we've known each other now for 20 years?
So about that?
About 20 years, and you've had so many meetings of Elijah together, and you've been the chair of the Elijah Board of World Religious Leaders. And here we are in Assisi, and I just showed you the place where we're looking at doing the House of Friendship and Hope, based on the Friendship campaign that also Patriarch Bartholomew contributed to. So it's like things are moving. We can see this trajectory of progress over the years. So speaking of progress, you know, there's progress of the institution, but there's also progress of individuals. So let me turn to you right now as President Archbishop of the UK and as head of the European Council of Churches, and ask you, having now spent all this time together with other religious leaders, how have you grown from it?
Well, I think you grow in your relationships and in your knowledge in several ways. First, the simplest one to understand is we come from a point of ignorance, and we go into a realm of some knowledge, because we really don't know much about the religions. We think we do. I remember when I was teaching in Berkeley, I always told students, please be sure you know what the church teaches and not what you think it teaches. Many times we have opinions and our understandings about other faith traditions and individuals as far as that goes, and we really don't have the knowledge. So that's one aspect of faith. The next aspect of faith and growing is, what do we really share in common? And I think we share a vision in common. We have that ideal, that value for hope. We have that value for peace. We have that understanding for a better world, a better humanity. And it doesn't come just by saying a prayer or standing in silence. It comes by action. And that means people are called into activity, to work together, to do things. And I think Elijah has helped me to develop that, and to, if you might want to use the word, to allow things to blossom.
How so? It's not clear to me yet.
Well, because I've met people from other faith traditions. I actually didn't study their faith or read about it. I actually spoke about it and was able to ask very serious questions. Sometimes questions people might consider a little bit touchy, you know, but we have to be very honest and open. And as I said once to you earlier, you know, you don't have to be afraid to dialogue. When you are secure in your own faith, your own identity, you don't have to be afraid. I think many times people build walls out of fear to keep the other outside and to keep us safe. And Elijah allows these walls to come tumbling down like Jericho. But these are not walls because of warring parties. These are the walls of friendship. And Elijah is helping to do that, whether in the center or through individuals or
hopefully through this new institution. But let me then focus on something. All your attention has just gone on to what you've learned about others. But how did you change in yourself? How did you learn more about yourself? What did you discover either about yourself or your religion through the encounter with others?
Well, first of all, you need to know your religion before you dialogue about things. And it made me learn more about my own faith.
Really?
And my own understanding about certain aspects of the faith. I made a comment this morning in a meeting in a small group, and we talked about the beginning of the year, the ecclesiastical year, the season of creation. Of course, people look to the Orthodox because Patriarch Bartholomew and his predecessor issued documents. But we really have to know that it comes from the Jewish tradition and also from the Roman tradition, the West. And we as inheritors of those various traditions, and people aren't aware that the Roman tradition, even the Judaic practices help that. So we need to study our own faith, our own traditions, to see that in my own history, that Orthodox leaders were not afraid to dialogue some centuries ago. And how did I also grow and develop in my own faith? Maybe in my own prayer life. Because you learn from others about their prayer life, about silence, about fasting, and certain other things.
So you've actually grown in your understanding of silence through an encounter with another religion?
I believe so, because you learn what silence meant for them. And it may have meant the same thing for you, but you never understood that. You couldn't verbalize it. We see people who stand sometimes for hours in prayer, not speaking. And you learn from those acts of simplicity.
It's very interesting what you say, because one of the reasons that we're developing this institution focused around prayer, it really grows out of my experience, where I feel like my own prayer life has deepened through encounter with other faiths. And therefore I'm saying, I would hope that other people have similar experience. And certainly spending time, I spend a lot more time with Catholics than with Orthodox, but certainly seeing how they practice silence, how they recite the Psalms, how they do the Lectio Divina, all these things have had an impact on me. So I'm absolutely delighted to hear, and I didn't know this before, that it had a similar impact on you.
But you don't know that until you experience it.
Exactly.
And then you can verbalize it.
Yeah. I think that's, but I just said something about Catholic, Orthodox, but the typical perspective, here we are hosted by Franciscans, they're open, etc. I come from a place where the local patriarch said, you go to Bartholomew, he's your friend, I don't want to deal with you, and where you encounter so much, and we've had common friends in one of the Orthodox churches, we're not going to mention the name right now, who we've spoken about how close and how hard-hearted they are. So what is it about Orthodoxy that makes most people closed to this, and why is there an exception where you're concerned or where with Patriarch Bartholomew is concerned, theologically speaking?
Well, I don't know if it's theological so much. Let's look at the practical aspects. Many Orthodox live in ghettos, if I might use that term, in the classical understanding. They've never experienced the outside world, and some of them don't want to. They want to feel safe. They don't want the other to come in. I always say, if you're a very good priest, you don't have to worry about losing any of your flock. Nobody will leave. You don't need to build walls. You don't need to establish laws, anything to keep people out. As far as theological reasons, when I sit in dialogue with a Buddhist, the Buddhist doesn't have the concept of God in his or her tradition. But I can still dialogue about other things. I mean, we talk about the world, we talk about the environment, we talk about sustainability, all sorts of things. We talk about poverty. Those are common elements that we share, and we need to dialogue about these things. My patriarch, Patriarch Bartholomew, the Ecumenical Patriarch, is not one who sees the faith with blinders. He sees the faith as something to be shared, something to give to others, but to also listen to others. I can't comment on other patriarchs or other hierarchs or whatever.
Let's talk about other hierarchs, but for instance, I know that other patriarchs would consider a project like the Jerusalem Hope Project with religion side-by-side praying, which is the model here in Assisi that Pope John Paul II launched, and the museum here. They see this as kind of syncretism. And clearly that's an expression of fear, like you spoke. So the fear that blocks the theological work. And you're saying that there's an openness that you have and that's been inculcated by the Ecumenical Patriarch, but it also has theological foundations that doesn't compromise the faith. So what is the theological difference that allows him to be open while others are closed?
I don't think that there's a theological difference.
Just personality?
It could be personality, it could be environment, it could be politics, it could be all sorts of things. We know in Jerusalem, there could be a mosque and a house of prayer, synagogue. Next door, down the street, is a Christian church, one of the very many branches. Or let's look at the Holy Sepulchre itself.
Right.
It's shared by groups. And yes, sometimes they come into conflict, but not for theological reasons.
Yeah,
it's a problem of time and space.
Right.
So there are such things as shared space for worship even, and we don't have to be afraid. Again, it goes back to the same, if you're secure in who you are and what you believe, and you know that, then you don't have to be afraid.
So we've been talking about encounters of leaders, and you just spoke about a good priest and the confidence of a priest. So how much of these principles and these experiences can extend from the leadership to the laity? Because what really implicit in what you said is that this kind of work is really better taken up by leadership rather than by fellowship, so to speak, because the fellowship, in other words, the community, the laity, may not have the tools in order to be able to do this properly. So here we are looking at an institution that's meant for everyone, like a museum, and is there a danger in opening up to other religions by broader masses of the community if they don't have the strength of faith that leaders have?
We go back to the idea of leadership, and let's look at food banks. How is it that people of different faith traditions and the atheists, agnostics, can come together and support a food bank? Because they see the common goal. They see what's true, they see what's right, and they're able to pool their resources. And I don't mean financially only, but they're able to pool their resources in a variety of ways to promote something that's of value and true. You don't have to be afraid. But that takes the leadership of a good rabbi, a good imam, a good priest, a civic leader, whatever.
So let me translate it to this concept. What you're saying is that you can come together theologically if you realize the deeper common ground, which is, say, the quest of God or quest of spirituality, a quest of a moral life. And those deep commonalities should outweigh the particular theological differences, and hence we need not be afraid. Is this correct? Is this rephrasing?
Well, I don't know if I would phrase it exactly like that, because we have to be sensitive to the theological issues. Because we don't want to be accused of going outside the boundaries of what's allowable, what's proper.
But within those boundaries, we can identify the deeper commonalities and not be afraid of those.
Absolutely.
So that's the analogy to the food bank.
Absolutely.
So ultimately, prayer is equivalent to food bank, but rather than being horizontal in relation to society, being vertical in relation to God, where we can learn from one another.
Well, the things
Everyone can, not only leaders.
You know, is there truth elsewhere?
Yeah, that's the question. Is there truth elsewhere?
All you have to do is read the saint for us, Justin the martyr philosopher, who said that the seeds of Christ and the seeds of God were everywhere.
Spermatologoia, I believe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to use the terminology,
Yeah,
but that's
to show off
exactly
a
what it
little,
is. Exactly, they exist elsewhere. But in order for seeds also to produce something, they need to be watered.
Ah, beautiful.
They need to be cultivated. But we know the truth exists. And the truth isn't something that we hoard.
So you don't feel like you have a greater portion of the truth than I as a Jew do?
I believe I have the truth.
What do I have then?
If you want to put it in a very technical way, you have an incomplete truth.
Ah, nice.
Because it was perfected in Jesus Christ for me.
Okay. So when you look at me, you do look at me as someone who has a lesser part of the truth.
I don't know if I would say a lesser part. It's incomplete for me.
Incomplete.
Because Christ for us is the fullness. He completes everything. But I don't put that as a judgment statement between
No, we know
you and me.
we know each other for 20 years. I never heard that you really think that of me.
But I also believe the following, that salvation and judgment are not in my hands. They're in the hands of God. You live and will be judged according to the law that you have and the truth that you have, just as I will be judged according to the truth and the law that I receive.
One thing I do want to say, though, that your very use of the term law is itself part of how Christians look at Judaism and very often criticize or do a reduction of Judaism to only law. And from a Jewish perspective, this view of Judaism as nomos, as law, really reduces the fundamental aspect of Brit, covenant, relationship with God. All those things get lost when Judaism is flattened to law.
I wasn't meaning it in that way.
Okay.
I wasn't meaning in that way. It encompasses much more. The law of the truth that I received is just not, love your neighbor and on down the line, which we share, as you know. The great Rabbi Hillel, use these same expressions and words. But the law for me is much more than that. It's an encompassing of the entire faith tradition. The same for Judaism.
Okay. I don't think that way, but I suppose most of my co-religionists would look at you and probably come up with an equivalent statement to what you made. Namely, okay, we recognize that poor fellow, he still worships idols, but he's a good man and he has a spiritual life and we can do food banks together. So most people will think that way. I personally have moved beyond that. In other words, if you ask me how I see you, I wouldn't say that I see you as a second-rate, you didn't say that about me though, or incomplete or waiting for the full thing. I'm, in that sense, more pluralistic than you, but I can understand that for Christians it will be very difficult to have full pluralism because of the exclusive belief in Christ that leaves very little room for others.
Correct.
I think in this sense, Judaism is potentially more pluralistic, but
it can be.
Potentially, that's what I said,
Yes.
potentially. Because for many Jews, they also apply a much more exclusivistic thing using the scepter of idolatry, and then that's it.
Yeah.
See you, boy, go to hell. Okay, so of the different faiths that you've encountered, through Elijah or otherwise, Which of those particular faiths have really left an imprint on you or were transformative for your own personal growth?
I would have to say, number one, Islam.
Islam, really?
Yes.
Oh my God, tell me more about that. I'm learning so many things during this conversation.
Well, the idea, first of all, of visiting shrines for them, and the prayer and even solitude at times, that was a learning experience for me.
Who was the instrument for that?
I don't remember.
In Elijah or elsewhere?
Yeah, we were in Morocco.
Of course. At the meeting in
he's from Canada.
Marrakesh.
He's from Canada.
The Muslim?
Yes.
Timothy.
No.
Timothy Gennady was from Canada.
No.
Okay, never mind. So this goes by our experiences in Marrakesh. Yeah, we really have traveled the world, haven't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that was a great learning experience for me.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you have an incomplete understanding of faith, even though I taught religious studies. But to experience, to encounter is a lot more than that. And I think that was one of the real learning experiences for me. And the idea of pilgrimage, which I like to develop, because it exists.
I think we went on a pilgrimage to the different faiths of Marrakesh, didn't we? Yes.
But the idea of pilgrimage is something that exists in many of the great faith traditions. And we often forget that. You know, even Chaucer talks about it. But the idea of pilgrimage in Christianity and Judaism.
Sure.
And I was explaining to someone the other day, you know, how the Seder begins, and they ask him the 4 questions. And he said, really? And I said, yes, of course. That's why you need to learn about other faith traditions. The Seder is the story, and it starts by asking questions, and you move through a meal. You see, this is part of the problem. We're ignorant of each other.
So tell me, how much of this process is social? How much is it intellectual? How much is it spiritual? Or are they indivisible?
I think they're indivisible.
Okay.
And that makes you holistic.
Makes you holistic. Good enough. Nikita, when you engage in this capacity, as you've described and as you've been in Elijah, and this is a tough one, how much are you in it as a Christian? How much are you in it as an Orthodox Christian? Where's the particularity of your theological identity come through in all these encounters?
I think I'm always an Orthodox Christian.
Can't be a generic, right? There's no such thing.
There is no such thing. But it depends not only for Elijah, it's my encounter with other Christians.
No, there you have to be Orthodox, because that's what differentiates you. But when you go into the interfaith situation, you may be bringing broader Christian or New Testament, and not, how much does the history of the Orthodox tradition impact your encounters with other faiths when you are in an interfaith context?
Well, I think it does, because I bring in my history, my traditions, my liturgy.
Who's your favorite saint?
I have several, but I love Saint Basil.
Saint Basil?
Great. But I also have some contemporary saints that are very good, especially one who was on a small island in Greece, and he served a leper colony.
What's his name?
Saint Anthimos of Chios.
Huh. So he has that in common with Saint Francis.
Yeah, I mean, you know, saintliness is not some formula or some nimbus that encompasses us. Saintliness, holiness is how you live.
Right.
And we see that holiness from these people come into the world. Let me tell you one thing. You have certain things in life that you possess, and they can be goodness, love, honesty, charity, and they can be greed, anger, hatred. You give to the other what you possess.
Yep.
And people like Saint Anthimos or Francis of Assisi gave positive things to the world. Peace, reconciliation with God, nature, and others. And then there are angry people in the world. And we see that especially amongst politicians.
And some religious leaders.
And some religious leaders. But, you know, when you have that anger and that ego, and you have those demons within you, you're going to give them to the world.
What do you think most religious leaders have in them, demons or angels?
True religious leaders have angels.
And what's the percentage of true religious leaders?
I don't know. I haven't taken the poll. One of the things that true religious leaders give people is hope.
Right.
And that is a critical issue and term and word for us right now.
Could you explain that?
Hope tells you how to live in a better way. But hope can also be a visible thing through a center, for example. a center that's there that gives people hope, where you can come in no matter who you are, no matter what faith tradition you come from. Even if you're an agnostic, you're an atheist, you might come into a building and see people from various traditions praying. And you see hope in that the world hasn't lost all its hope.
So you consider that the Assisi Center's main message would be one of hope? That we can have unity and diversity? That's the core of the hope?
Well, I think that at its core, it's going to have hope. And I think that that's what Francis gave the world. I mean, he came at a critical time in history, and he went to touch the hearts of many simple people, and he gave them hope. This center, which is based in Assisi, can continue his message. And it's not only his message, it's a universal message.
So do all religious leaders give hope, or it's a particularity of some?
I think true religious leaders give hope.
True religious. And which then raises for me the question, so, here we are in a city that's primarily Catholic, and we have this notion of hope. Is there any particular Orthodox angle on this emerging institution that would be relevant?
Our participation. We might help decorate with iconography.
No, that's impractical, but in terms of the conceptual, theological weight that we bring to it, is there anything that an Orthodox presence would have to bring here, or just the very fact of the ecumenicity, if there's such a word?
I think the presence itself is a loud statement.
Right.
I think, actions speak louder than words, and the presence would be a statement that we're here, we're present, we share. We're not outside, we're not in isolation, and we're part of this.
And how does all this feed into peace? Locally, globally, Israel-wise? How, if we have the center here in Assisi, in what way would its eventual fruits translate to peace in any way?
Well, first of all, it's a witness in a world of problems that people can still get along. That people who
You need the witness today, do you think?
Absolutely. People, a Muslim and a Jew and a Christian can all live side by side.
Not to mention a Hindu and a Buddhist.
Well, I was going to go and they're across the street.
Right.
And their children can all come out and play together. We need to worry less about land, who owns it, and all these types of things. The earth is the Lord's and thereof.
So then how do you carry that back to a place where the Holy Land is disputed? So the lesson just remains decontextualized. How can you transfer that lesson back home, so to speak?
Well, we have to learn how to live together and at least try to address matters in a civil way if we can.
I heard, you will know more about this, that as part of resolving the conflicts that you alluded to earlier at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, there was some experiment in taking the people there elsewhere so they could form their relations on neutral ground, which then reconditioned their attitudes in the Holy Sepulchre. Have you heard anything like that?
No, I haven't. But that would be a wonderful thing.
So that's really what you're suggesting for here. In other words, practice building relations here,
Correct.
And then you can get the benefits back there.
Correct.
Any final word you want to say about the Assisi Center or Interfaith? Or
I just want to make an appeal for people to take off the blinders and for people to see others as human beings and to see the good things, the positive things, and that we can learn from one another. You don't have to be afraid of the other, and you don't have to threaten the other. That's what this center can also teach and give to a world that's sad, a world that's destroying itself, but we can give those seeds of
so
hope.
if fear is the big enemy, its counterpart is?
Hope.
Hope, okay. Because typically one says the counterpart is love. I love this, what you're saying now. The counterpart of fear really is hope.
Hope.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, brother.